each of you could give just a 1-minute overview of your companies, stages, cover any metrics. If you want to do that, that'd be great.
Sure. Hi, I'm Daphne, founder of Deliv. We're a crowdsourced same-day delivery provider. What distinguishes us sort of in this space is we're really focused on the B2B side. So we're not a marketplace. You don't buy anything from us. But if you shop at Macy's.com or Best Buy or Walgreens or Williams-Sonoma, Bloomingdale's, any one of the top national retailers, and you go to checkout, and there's a same-day option there, we're the guys doing that behind the scenes. Also picking up if there are returns, picking it up and bringing it back to the store. We do that for the large retailers. We power a lot of e-commerce players, so Google Shopping Express, a lot of the floral marketplaces, work with small businesses as well. Most recently closed our round of financing led by UPS, and they've got a bunch of deliveries they do on a daily basis as well. Some of them are last mile. We're in 17 markets, work with close to about 5,000 different businesses. We started in 2012, so about 4 years old.
My name's Ken Davis. I'm the CEO and founder of a company called TaskEasy. This company, there's an Uber of everything, and we decided to do something really old school and become the Uber of lawn mowing. So we mow about 400,000 lawns at this point in 4,800 cities using a network of about 5,000 contractors. And really we actually try to deploy the UPS or FedEx model where once you've ordered from us, we guarantee that that lawn will get done. So that's actually something we're really proud of. It's a big fun network, and we're just trying to make it more efficient every day.
I'm Sean Baer. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Zerx. We're about 2 years old. We started out as a consumer on-demand valet parking app, and we pivoted to enterprise logistics for mobility. So we work far more with businesses than consumers, but we're really interested in how do people who have lots of cars operate that fleet efficiently using technology.
Well, I'm Mark Agrawal. I run a company called Your Mechanic and talk about old school. We fix cars at people's homes and offices. We started in 2012 when we launched. Now we're in 40 markets. We just closed our Series B 6 months ago, just announced actually a couple of months ago. Yeah, the value proposition is very simple for us. It's, car repair delivered at your home, cost less money than going to shops, and delivered at, more trust and transparency than going to dealerships, which I'm sure most of you love going to shops and dealers, so you should try it out.
Great, thanks very much. You guys are all pretty far along compared to we usually invest in seed stage, so there's going to be some great metrics, I think, out of this. I just want to ask maybe 7 or 8 questions. Whoever feels it's relevant to, please answer, and then we'll save 5 or 6 minutes for the audience. The first question I wanted to ask is, how do you know whether or not to expand into a new market, geographical market, and how do you go about doing that?
So we have, when Uber goes into a new market, they have this real temporal problem, which is that they have to respond to a user's request within minutes. And so they have to really think about how to launch into a market. And we have the luxury of lawn grows, but it doesn't grow very fast. And so we oftentimes have, 2, 3, 4, even 7 days before we have to get there and mow a lawn. And so we were able to launch our platform nationally in advance of recruiting our first contractor, which is a little risky, and it was a little bit like the Wild West for a while. But now we have a good established network of contractors, and we have a really vigorous process for bringing on new contractors when we don't have supply for a new order. So that kind of unique to our environment, but that's what we did.
So our market is a bit different. We're not in the demand creation business. When we do a deal, for example, with Macy's, and we integrate onto their checkout page, it's one integration, and they're the ones that decide, okay, we're in 4 markets, 8 markets, 17 markets, 100 cities, however they want, and when they're the ones that decide, okay, we want to go into these markets, they flip a switch and the demand is there. And unlike some of the on-demand kind of companies in the world of retail and delivery, it's not about getting your lunch in 30 minutes or getting your coffee in 20 minutes. Someone buys something, it takes the retailer maybe an hour or so to get it ready. customers pick in a time-definite window later in the day. So we don't actually have any drivers in each city, so it's pretty easy to do. So we expand pretty quickly.
What about you, Art? It seems as though you might have a more extensive process behind launching a new market.
So for us, we get about 1 million requests a year. So we have always been just following demand. We have never opened a city where we didn't have a ton of demand already. So it's a very easy process for us. We look at the demand, we look at how many mechanics we need in a given zip code, and launch cities based on the existing demand. So it hasn't been that difficult.
Do you need a certain number of mechanics at the ready in order to launch that market?
It depends on how much demand we are getting. So like, when we opened Los Angeles, it was 4 times as many mechanics on the average city that we were launching with because the demand volume was very high. So just really looking at on a given month or given week, how many requests are we getting, how many mechanics do we need to fulfill those requests with what skill sets, what tools, etc. And then just going and getting those mechanics.
Great. And Sean, I think you guys pivoted a bit. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, the market in the consumer side, it's a very different world than the enterprise side. I think one of the things that's been interesting about enterprise is we only go to a market when a company brings us there. So it's probably more similar to Deliv. In the consumer market, all the pressure was on us to choose the right markets and manage the supply and the demand. In the enterprise business, we've been fortunate that we've had great customers who bring us into new markets.
And when you pivoted, how did you convey that message to all your stakeholders, your customers, your investors, employees?
I think, I'll speak for some of the CEOs up here. Typically, the CEO is the last person to know. I think, the people that I was most worried about was our internal stakeholders, our team members who would, joined one mission and now we're sort of embarking on a new mission. They were more excited to focus on one thing rather than trying to do 2 things, one of which wasn't working. So, but I do think most of the time the stakeholders know before you know. And their job is to sort of push you towards that decision.
This one I think is for everyone. I'm curious about your best growth strategy or how you grow your customer base. What's the tool that you use the most, or is it Facebook ads or referrals, whatever it happens to be? If you could talk about that. If you want to share it.
Everybody's looking at me. We don't grow at all. So we've really had an aggressive SEO strategy. It's a very affordable way to drive a lot of traffic to our website. We've also found that a little bit of business development goes a long way. So even though we started out as strictly a consumer platform, we're now doing things like mowing all the lawns for Circle K in Florida, which is not a nice little, boost to our business, having just having to have one conversation with one entity as opposed to thousands of conversations with individuals. I'd say television has actually been a surprisingly good marketing tactic for us. Our customer acquisition cost using television is about the same as it is for AdWords. And the nice thing about that is, AdWords has this ceiling where once you've spent all you can spend, you can't spend any more to acquire customers via AdWords. And in most cases, I think there's probably AdWords spaces where that's not true, but it certainly is for lawn mowing. But television is so big and you can spend so much money there that if your cost of customer acquisition is measured right, and it works well, you can just keep pouring money onto that, or pouring fuel onto that fire. So that's been a surprise for us.
I mean, we looked at all the ways people search for a mechanic, and the number one way people search for mechanics is by searching. 42% of the people, when they need a mechanic, they go on Google search and start there, which means it results into roughly about 70 million searches a month. So, if you think about it, that's like an infinite channel that if you just focus on one thing, you probably could be a very large business. So we have, for the last almost 3.5 years, done only one thing, search, and that's resulting into more than 1 million requests a month, 1 million requests a year now. So
what about referrals? It seems like mechanics would be a high referral rate.
yeah, so very good amount of referrals. So direct traffic, referral traffic, repeat usages are all pretty healthy. But in terms of just the focus on growth levers, search works amazingly well.
And what kind of data do, whoever wants to answer, each of you use to make your business decisions? Whether it's hiring more people or targeting businesses instead of I like your Circle K example. What metrics are you looking at, or what KPIs are interesting to you?
So in our business, it's really all about the optimization of the routes on our side and the KPIs for our customers. So on the routes, when we start working with a retailer, we take a look at their data, we see where their e-commerce destinations, where are people getting their e-commerce orders shipped to, where's the location of their stores, what inventory is in what stores, and there might be a retailer that has 100 stores in a 50-mile radius, and we do a network optimization exercise and say, you want to pick these 16 stores, this is going to be the right balance to optimize between how far you're going to drive in your pickup and your delivery versus how many you're going to pick up at any one time. And then we have the routing optimization. Which car do you dispatch for which pickup? If it's a TV, you're not dispatching it to a bicycle. What's the route? What's the capacity? How do you manage the capacity planning of the driver? So it's all of those metrics around the logistics. And then we work with the customers to figure out the KPIs on their business, the conversion rates, the basket size, the reduction in return rates, relate the last mile same day delivery to their metrics.
So my background is statistics with an emphasis in game theory, and I did cybersecurity for about 12 years, and so I have a lot of friends in the industry that make fun of me a lot now for mowing so many lawns. But we look at a lot of data, and some of the places where we find interesting data surprises us. Like, for example, pricing lawns accurately is one of our most important and one of our biggest challenges. And we pull up satellite imagery of the lawns, and we try to estimate the green space in terms of square feet so we can measure it that way. But it turns out that even the shape of the lawn has a fair impact on how it should be priced, because if it's a big rectangle, it's easier to mow, and if it's a lot of windy spaces, it's harder to mow. So, or corner lots of homes tend to cost a little more because there's a lot more areas that need to be edged, and that's more expensive to the landscaper. So we do a lot with that. Pricing is really big for us. Another thing, and we do snow clearing in the winter, and we found that we can actually overlay the Google topography data on top of the satellite imagery and see if it's a northern facing or a southern facing slope, which affects the rate of snow accumulation and ablation. And so it helps us to dispatch our contractors more efficiently that way. So there's a ton of little ideas that surface and allow us to use data to do a better job for our contractors. Ultimately, if we can keep them from having to make a special trip just to bid on a job, we've usually cut the cost in half, because these are small priced jobs. If you got a $1,000 job, going out to bid it makes sense. But if you got a $35 job, just bidding it costs $35.
The only other one I'd bring up is just the nature of meeting an ETA in a time frame, right? We're in a time-based business. I think all of us have some notion of that time-based, and you have a customer who has an expectation, and what's your sort of on-time delivery, right? I think sort of similar to the airlines, like how often, if you promise 2 p.m., do you deliver before 2 p.m.? It's something we track all the time.
Look at a very handful of data that basically makes all our decisions. We look at our NPS, we look at our wait time, we look at our quality score, which is defined by number of metrics, and I look at our conversion rates. And those are the 4 things we look at almost on a daily basis. And then the thing in this market we are very heavily focused on is profitability, right? So funding markets are not as sexy as it was like 6 months ago. So like how do you, any channels that you're working on, like, first transaction profitability, ensuring that your gross margins are heavy, like we have 35% gross margin business. So maintaining that, ensuring that we're not doing jobs that are, we're losing money on. But the 4 key metrics were the early ones that I mentioned, and then everything else is sort of secondary.
Your business, Art, is, to me, feels like the most difficult one because of the trust component. How do you deal with, well, 2 things really, the trust and I never looked at Euromechanic when you were raising money, but I remember thinking like that's going to be really hard for the trust. But also the estimate. How do you estimate a job properly?
Yeah, so I mean, trust was the reason we got into the business. You know, I'm an Asian guy, I go to shop, every time it feels like I'm getting ripped off. So we did a lot of things. I mean, the early 2.5 years of the business was all about building logistics and products that ensures trust on the platform. So in our case, mechanics don't get to set prices. We set all the pricing. We supply all our own parts. We have our own catalog. All delivery networks set by us. We also match the mechanic based on the skills and tools they have to the jobs that they can perform. So the customer, you never have to worry about that, you know, mechanic Art is better than mechanic Sean. Like, it doesn't, like, the platform will tell you which mechanic to book. And then we guarantee everything, right? So if if the mechanic comes out, it comes with a 12-month, 12,000 miles warranty. Any problem you have, you need a second opinion, you call us, we connect you with a network of mechanics you can get second advice from. And that's how our NPS has stayed so high. Our NPS is 87.9. We track it DMA by DMA, week by week, for all the mechanics, and also for the mechanics. So mechanics have to maintain an NPS of 80. Very trusted experience.
Is anyone concerned about employee versus contractor rules?
I think we're all paying attention to it. I think, like, we're in such an age-old industry, and probably mechanics are this way a little bit too, that it's well understood that you have general contractors and subcontractors in landscaping, and so it's not quite so odd as what Uber has had to go through in terms of displacing a whole network of taxi drivers. We really haven't had anything come up yet, but I'm sure we will. And I do think the industry is going to change a little bit over the coming years. I think a lot more regulation will be made about what benefits have to be provided to subcontractors versus employees. There's a lot of talk about creating a whole new category of worker. I don't know that that's taking off, but things will change, and we'll just adapt. I mean, one thing that we've realized is if we were forced to make them all employees, we could actually do them a great service. We're already providing general liability and accidental occupational insurance to about 83% of our contractors, which is a big part of our business. And so we'd love to provide more benefits to them. We think it's useful to have a large pool of people that get those benefits.
Daphne, you
Yeah,
seem a little
we
closer.
also pay attention to that. Of course, you have to. And what we've learned, simply put, is the extent of ICs and compliance issues has to do with how much you do or don't manage them. So, for one, we make sure that we're not managing really anything, if they work, when they work, what they do. It's really all up to them. At the same time, we've had to gone and do the diligence. In our particular business, financially, it's a push. If employees, it would be a push, because at this point, if they're employees, I could actually tell them, you need to go to San Francisco from 12 to you need to go to Fremont tomorrow between 8. I could tell them where to go. My utilization would be much higher. So financially, it's a push. We choose to continue with the IC method because, frankly, it's what the drivers want.
Yeah, that reminds me of another thing in our platform. Most of our contractors are employers themselves, and they have crews. So unlike Uber, where there's a one-to-one relationship there, one-to-many relationship there with Uber, where Uber works directly with an individual driver, we usually work with business owners that have employees. And so, if we ended up, we would just become like a payroll service if we ended up taking on that burden for them, and that'd be fine.
John, what's your typical customer, or who is it?
Our typical customer is somebody who has a fleet of vehicles and is interested in how do you better use technology to solve the things that you need around those vehicles, right? If you have a fleet of vehicles, on any given day, some of them need to be washed and some of them need to be moved. And you can do that with spreadsheets and paper, or you can use a tech platform. And that's our typical customer.
I don't know if there's an effective way for audience questions. Yell it out. Anybody? No? Okay. Going to, I think we only have a minute left. Anything else you want to add before I go on to a last question? And, is anyone fundraising? One thing I wanted to ask you, Daphne, to follow on your question or answer, Did you get pushback during Series B? Because that must have happened about the same time that Uber had this $100 million.
No, so we just raised kind of a Series B. The employee IC in our world and in the world of couriers, ICs has been there for 100 years. So it's a pretty common sort of practice. So wasn't the question, although there were many others.
Right. Okay, I think that's it for this panel. Thanks very much. Really appreciate it.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody.